Welcome to Everyone Loves Guitar, where we get to sit down and talk with interesting professional guitar players and related music industry experts. If you love playing guitar, stick around. You're in the right place. Hey everybody, this is Craig Garber from Everyone Loves Guitar, and we've got a monster jazz player to interview today. Really cool guy. I'm with Randy Johnston. He's one of the most widely recorded and prolific guitarists of his generation. He's released 12 albums as a leader for the Muse, High Note, J-Curve, Mel Bay, and Random Acts labels, and he's appeared on dozens of recordings with other top recording artists. In addition to his recording career, he's toured and played with some of the most acclaimed names in jazz, including Lionel Hampton, Houston Person, and Etta Jones, Lonnie Smith, and he's played for 17 years as a regular member of the Lou Donaldson Quartet. He's traveled all over the world, concertizing both as a band leader and as a side musician, performing at the top clubs and festivals all over the States, Europe, Japan, Thailand, and South America. You know, it's weird because America's like a very ethnocentric place. We're almost not even aware those places exist. You know, it's really, and when you grow up in New York City, you're even more ethnocentric because like you don't think anything exists outside of New Jersey and like maybe Texas, right. And you're sort of aware there's California out there. It's very bizarre. Isn't it? Already recognized all over the world for his guitar skills, Randy's live performances and his last two recordings feature him as a vocalist as well, singing his original songs as well as standards, jazz standards, and blues standards. His vocals have been favorably compared to those of Ray Charles, and the combination of instrumental and vocal performances make for an extremely varied and entertaining live set. Both his vocal and substantial catalog of instrumental compositions enjoy frequent airplay, both in the traditional and internet radio formats. Randy's also taught music at New York University, the Hart School of Music in Hartford, Connecticut, University of Miami in Coral Gables, that's here in Florida, and several other major American universities of note, in addition to conducting master classes in such diverse locations as Wales in the United Kingdom and Helsinki, Finland, which I hear is like gorgeous. Is that true?
It is. Yeah, Finland is a nice country. Helsinki is great. In the wintertime, it kind of gets dark at 2 in the afternoon and light and about 10 o'clock in the morning. So
wow.
And then in the summertime, you have a lot of daylight. So
very cool.
It's a great place.
Well, man, thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate your time. So let me ask you a question. You've played with loads of people, really top people. So I was curious if you could talk about, for these two folks, how'd you get the gig, and what was either the most memorable part of playing with them, or maybe any kind of lessons you learned during the time you played together?
Yeah.
The first would be Lionel Hampton.
Well, Lionel Hampton, I did not play with very long. I basically did a recording with him with a friend of mine named Terry Thornton, who was a great jazz vocalist who I used to play with in New York, and she was out in San Francisco a long time. And actually, I was on the way back from another recording session, and she called me and asked me if I wanted to record with Lionel Hampton, and she was singing. And so that was basically my experience with him. That was a very memorable session, and funny things happened also. And he was quite elderly at the time. He came into the session wearing, usually when people record, they want to be casual, they wear something comfortable. But he came into the session wearing an immaculate double-breasted three-piece suit with including a vest and a tie and a striped shirt, and the suit looked like it might have been from the 1930s or something. But it was really beautiful, and he was playing, and we played some live songs. We played a lot of blues, and then he had this gigantic hero sandwich that he wanted to eat during the session, and this was one of the tunes that Terry was going to sing on, and we were going to leave 4 choruses in front to for her to put the vocal on later. We were just going to play the track, and she was going to sing the chorus. So I was very young, and he was an old legendary guy. So he asked me, can you count and play at the same time? And I thought he was maybe making fun of me or something. So I said, yeah, I think so. And he goes, well, yeah, I'll tell you what, you count 4 choruses when we're recording, and then give me a signal to when I'm supposed to come in. See, then after the 4 choruses, the vocal that she was going to do later, he was going to come in and play a vibe solo. So we're playing the track, and I'm counting. We play 1 chorus of the blues, 12 bars long, and I give him 1, signal 1. And meanwhile he's eating the sandwich, which is a giant overstuffed sandwich, lots of salami and vegetables and ham and mayonnaise and mustard, all this stuff on it, and with his suit on. So then it turns out the second chorus I give him 2, third chorus I give him 3, and then the last chorus I give him like every 4 bars. So it's the first 4 bars of the blues, I go 4 and 8, and now I can see him starting to try to put down the sandwich so he can pick up the mallets and start playing the vibes. But so I got to the last four measures, and I'm signaling him. So finally it comes time for him to play his solo, and I signal him like this, to give him the high sign, and the sandwich just goes all right down the front of his suit.
Holy crap!
But
did he come in though? Did he get in?
Yeah,
he made it on time.
He brushed it off and picked up the mallets and came in and played a great solo. So
wow, that's
was
so funny.
My experience with him, that wasn't long, and I think the other one you're going to ask me about is Lou Donaldson. That's a totally different thing. I played with him for a long time.
Sure. How did you get the gig with Lou originally?
With Lou, Lou had heard me on the radio playing on an album with Houston Person, the great saxophonist Houston Person, who is my very good friend for many years and kind of mentor and producer when I recorded for Muse and High Note Records. And I was playing on one of his records with Joey DeFrancesco on organ, and Houston and some other folks. So Lou heard me, and Lou was looking for someone to go on a tour to Europe with. So he called me up. I just heard from him out of the blue, and basically hired me for this tour in Europe. And I actually went down to the Village Vanguard. They were playing with the regular guitar player, was great guitar player Peter Bernstein, good friend of mine, and he was leaving to go do some other gig. So I went down to the Vanguard and sat in, played 1 tune with Lou, and then after that I just went for a 3-week tour in Europe, and I stayed 18 years after that.
Wow! So I guess you guys hit it off.
We hit it off. Yeah, it was a great gig. And it's hard for me to put into words how many great things I learned from him. And I was standing on that stage through several different apartments, and through like a marriage, through basically a son growing up and going off to college, and all kinds of different changes. And that was kind of like the constant in my life for so long. It was really incredible. I don't think many people have that experience. No,
not for 17 years in the music business. That's like 100 years, man. Yeah,
it was actually 18, I think, when I finally, but it was incredible. And yeah, but I met him. He called me up. He heard me on WBGO in Newark, the radio station.
That's funny. Now, the Village Vanguard, that's over on 7th Avenue, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's on 7th Avenue around 10th Street in Greenwich Village.
Yeah. I saw a buddy of mine play there, I don't know, 5, maybe 10 years back.
Oh, yeah.
Wow, that's a really cool story. Let me ask you this. I think music, and you please let me know if I am wrong, I think music is received differently, and I think artists are appreciated differently in places like Europe, Japan, Thailand, and South America versus here in the States. Can you either correct me if I'm wrong, or if it's accurate, can you tell me what the differences might be?
Well, it's wrong, and it's not wrong or right. It's if there's a real great hip audience in the United States, that's as great as any place it is. But there are differences, and people say Europe. There's a lot of different countries in Europe. So
yeah, that's very true.
But generally speaking, European countries have more of a tradition of concerts, of going to music and hearing concerts than people in America. So if you play somewhere there, it's more like a concert where everybody goes to listen to whatever is being presented there, and they treat it with a certain amount of respect. Whereas they don't have as many places that are just bars that people go in to have a good time and they have music.
Oh.
Which is sort of more like the thing like in the United States. And I mean, the greatest place that I played as far as jazz audience, people knowing what they were listening to and really being into it, the greatest place was Japan by far. No.
In what way?
In the way that, for instance, one time I was playing in a very small Japanese jazz club, which Japanese jazz club can be as small as like somebody's living room, and usually they have a bar behind they have a bar, and behind the bar is a turntable with like 10,000 vinyl records there that they've collected. So it was one of these places like that, the little place, and I had this thing that I would do at the end of the night when I actually ran out of songs, when I would play this calypso tune, St. Thomas, which is pretty short form, and every time the chorus came around, I would modulate up a half step. So if I started off in C, the next chorus I'd be in D flat, and then D, then E flat, all the way around the 12 keys till I got back to C.
Really cool.
And when I played that in this club, like everybody at the bar, everybody in the whole club, every time the modulation came up, they all went, "Oh yeah!" They were listening that hard.
Wow.
And I also had a couple of guys come up to me. I had a guy come up to me there with a like a shopping bag full of every CD that I had ever played a note on, which is not that many. I mean, I know people that played on hundreds of CDs. Me, it's not hundreds, but it's a few dozens.
Dozens, yeah.
And he's, as a sideman and as a leader, and he had everyone in the bag.
Wow.
And I had to sign them and stuff, which was great. But some of the ones I had never even seen myself. So they have some great fans there. That's a great place to play. And Thailand it's like a big party. It's a great place, but it's not really a jazz country. But every place, if you get the right people to listen to you, it's good. And also people like things from somewhere else. So if you're an American and you're going to Europe, and you're there for one gig, people sort of pay attention to you.
You're the out of town expert.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
It's interesting. I've heard that from other artists about Japan. Most recently is last week, and I wish I could tell you who said it to me. I can't remember it, but I've heard that that they love those audiences, that they're incredibly respectful, and their attention to detail as to what you're doing is phenomenal.
And also there, when we would play in a small town, the gig was usually ended pretty early. It'd be like 7 to 9 or something like that. And then a lot of times everybody in the club, the small clubs, or the club owner and the staff, and a lot of the audience too, would go out and have this huge party afterward.
Oh, that's so cool.
And one time, to give you an example, in a small town, I traded. I had an Om charm, this thing, hung a pendant which was a little Om sign, and I traded this guy at the party my Om charm for his Western shirt. So
that's wild.
So they're not stiff at all, they have this image is sort of being very straight, and they do work really hard, but they love to have fun, and there's usually this big dinner and everything after. I found the hospitality to be really, really great there.
Interesting. I just remembered who I was talking about, and what he was telling me, he's played Japan and China. Mm-hmm. And I asked him, what's the difference in both? And the first thing he said was, well, the most obvious thing is Japan is pristine. He said, it's so clean. And the people are so clean. He said, whereas China is filthy. And he goes, it's just kind of a dirty place. Yeah. Which was interesting. And I don't know that, and there was anybody listening, it was a completely non-racist comment. So before the social justice police jump on it, he was just making observations of it. But he was in love with Japan. He had nothing but great things to say about the fans there.
Yeah, I've never been to China. I hope to go sometime. I can't comment on that, but I think it is quite different. Different from what I've heard as far as certain things. So.
It's interesting. There's one of my favorite, I don't read much fiction, but one of my favorite fiction authors is a guy named Haruki Murakami. I don't know if you've ever heard of him.
No.
He's actually a Japanese author, and he's probably written, 30 books, 40 books, and they've been translated all over the world. Really, really good writer. And his whole thing was he owned a jazz club. And in every one of his stories, or maybe not everyone, but a recurring theme throughout many of his stories is the setting of a jazz club. And and I've heard him in interviews about how intimate it is and how, it is, it's just a great connections are made there. So it's interesting that you said that, and specifically jazz.
Yeah, the typical old, I played a lot of the really small typical Japanese jazz clubs, especially out in the western part of Japan, which is around Fukuoka, the Kyushu Island, which is the western part, and also in the center around Osaka, which Osaka is the second biggest city in Japan. It's 2 million people more than New York City.
Oh, wow. So it's massive.
And Tokyo is double the size of New York. So
you got 16 million people in Tokyo, roughly.
Yeah, it's
Holy
really
crap.
But Tokyo, they have lots of small jazz clubs, but there I played the Blue Note, which is a big, really, really nice club, and a big club. That I played there with Lou Donaldson, and that was great too. But both of them were great. But the typical small Japanese jazz club with they always have the bar with the record player behind it and all the vinyl records. It's really kind of great,
And that's how he describes in his book, with the vinyl records behind.
Yeah,
he's always talking about his protagonist, the hero. It's really cool. Always has this massive collection of jazz records.
I gotta get this. I gotta get this.
The guy's name is Haruki, Haruki Murakami, Murakami. He's just a brilliant author. I mean, he's a phenomenal author. And I can't even describe. I'm not a science fiction guy. I want to say it's science fiction, but it's really not. I'll tell you what I like about him most. He does a very good job of addressing human flaws, and especially a lot of his characters are flawed in that they are there's just an emptiness in them. And much of the novel, without addressing this, that this is an empty guy, there's a piece missing, and here's what he does to fill in that piece. But it's a very interesting how he portrays his characters. They're all they're all a little aloof, and there's a bit of an emptiness in them. And they have all these things, jazz music, and he's cooking boiled eggs and spaghetti. I love the guy. I think he's a tremendous writer. Look him up. There's enough books to choose from.
I will. Thank you.
Spend an hour on one of them.
Great.
You said you conducted master classes in Wales and Helsinki, Finland. What does that mean when you do a master class?
Well, it's certain ones are different, but I did it in a lot of places all over in the United States also, and a lot of other places in Europe, and I did a couple in Japan too, and I did I did some master classes at in Bangkok also at there are 3 universities that teach jazz in Bangkok. So
Oh, wow.
usually what it involves, it'll be some kind of it could be just a one-day thing or a couple-hour thing where I do a little demonstration, like either play by myself or I play with some of the faculty or something like that, and then people will ask me questions. And a lot of times, if it's just guitarists, then they'll ask me questions about specific techniques, like how to play, through a certain set of chord changes, or how to memorize standard tunes, and then if it's the whole student body with all the different instruments represented, they'll ask me questions about, how do you remember where you are in the form of the song when you improvise on it, all kinds of different musical, or what was it like to travel, to different places and to play a concert, and do you get jet lagged? It's everything from very specific questions to very general questions. And the ones that I did in Wales, I did that a few times, and that was for a guy over there named Trevor Owen who puts on these guitar master classes. So that was all guitarists. So it was very specific about different ways of playing the music on the guitar, like the different chord forms and shapes and patterns. And then one time I remember I did a little jazz guitar family tree, the way I saw it, as they wanted to know which players were descended from Charlie Christian and which from Django Reinhardt. So, the best.
That's interesting.
I don't know. I don't necessarily know that better than anybody else, but I drew a little thing on the board of how I thought it, the influences went from them. So it's all kind of different things, but it'll be anything from very specific musical questions. Sometimes I'll work with some of the student bands there. In other words, one of the things I did in Thailand with that, and the one in Finland I did, the student bands would play a tune, and I would have to supposed to criticize them or say how they could have done it better. And I don't really like to criticize anyone negatively. I don't really get paid enough for that, but
but you're able to help somebody.
Yeah, but I could say something like, well, after you take your last solo, why don't you trade with the drummer, or you got lost, or this certain song has another part to it that you could put in, things like that. So
cool. Oh, cool. Yeah. So those are good. Those are like, I bet those are fun to do.
They're fun, and in my other teaching, I did, I taught for years at NYU and at SUNY Purchase and Hart, and there I did a lot of one-on-one guitar lessons, and also teaching some ensemble classes. But if you see somebody every week, you can get into things more in depth. But it's a lot more fun to actually just go in and talk to the kids and really have fun with them. Or they're not always kids, sometimes adults and sometimes young people, and just have a nice time for an afternoon. That is very fun. Yeah,
I've done that, like with marketing stuff, and you're in a room and it's kind of like people go on a hot seat and they say, here's my specific problem, how would you fix it? It is fun to do those. Yeah,
there's some stuff like that. People will play and then they'll say, how do you, and I'll tell them what I think that could be done to improve that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Are there different musical cultures in one university to the next? I mean, is the music culture at NYU different from the music culture in Hartford versus Miami and so on?
That's a really good question. Actually, it's not as different as you would think. My perspective on it is although it certainly is different, of course, but my perspective on it is kind of like, I was one of the first generations to graduate from jazz school when I went to the University of Miami back in the mid 70s up till about 1981, and that place and Berkeley and Boston kind of were the first ones to, and a couple of the other ones were the first ones to kind of set the standard techniques for teaching jazz. Like, in other words, this is a chord, and this scale goes with this chord, and this mode goes with this scale, and then you're supposed to do these all these different, basically different harmonic things, exploring the chord structure, and which are all good things, and they're shortcuts. And what they do is they kind of make it so that everybody can play, to sort of a good level. But remarkably, that almost all the schools I've seen pretty much teach the same thing.
They do, and the kids aren't any, their mindset's the same all over.
Yeah, pretty much. They like music, and they want to learn how to do it. That's what they're there for.
Sure.
And they're open to it. And you'll get some individuals that are really more that are more motivated than others. But I can't say that there. And there's certainly places where the jazz culture or the music culture is more ingrained than other places. In other words, in Thailand, even though the jazz culture is very young, it's only probably the last 20 years or 10 years that people have started trying to teach it, and so the people aren't as used to listening to it there. So the students they're not as advanced there as they are in
sure, that makes sense.
At the University of Miami or at or in Finland. The kids there, they were at the Sibelius Academy. Sibelius is a famous Finnish composer. They played their ass off there. But because the music culture is much more. It's more ingrained there. So there are differences in the general level of the kids, but I mean, it's more the same than you would think.
Interesting.
Yeah. And they all try to play the same tunes and stuff too, a lot,
the typical standards that you want to learn.
Yeah, which is good because then anybody in any part of the world can go and jam with somebody else, but it's really been kind of distilled down to this kind of small thing. Although there are differences, and. When I worked up at the University of Hartford at first, my boss was the saxophone player Jackie McLean, who's one of the originals, right after Charlie Parker, like Lou Donaldson. And he didn't know any of the theory about the Dorian mode and all that stuff, so he taught very differently, than and it was interesting because. He's a great saxophonist and a famous saxophonist, so the school would attract lots of saxophonists. And the ones that had great ears and had a lot of talent, they would just go, because they would listen to him play and listen to him talk, and they would get better than the guys at Berkeley or something that learned all by the numbers. But the ones that didn't have much talent and much ears, they stayed all the same. They would graduate. They were really not great then either. Whereas the ones at a typical school, that they learn all by the numbers. You plug this scale into this when it does this, and you do this, and you do that. Everybody kind of gets more onto a certain base
because
level.
You're all on the same learning path.
Right.
That makes sense.
Jackie, the ones that were good, and he would pay more attention to them. He'd certainly play favorites and all, and they would really take off, where some of the other ones. So it was a different way. It was more like an apprenticeship kind of.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, that's the guy I'd rather have.
It just all depends. They're both good. It's both good.
Sure. What are you working on now, Randy, that you're excited about?
Oh, well, I'm down here in Virginia now, in Charlottesville, which is a great music town, and I have this band with this great young organ player named Jonah Kane West, and I did a lot of playing with the organ players. I played with Jimmy McGriff and Jack McDuff and DeFrancesco and Lonnie Smith and all of them. And this guy is a young guy, about 30 years old. We've had this great little band together, and we're going into the studio to record again in December. So that's kind of what I'm working on now.
That's awesome. You have all the tracks written?
Yeah, well, we had this steady gig, which we had for the better part of a year every Sunday at this club here, in addition to a lot of other gigs around. And so this should be a good one because we've actually tested out a lot of this material on a lot of audience.
That makes things a little less risky.
So that's a good thing.
Yeah, that's real good.
Yeah.
Where are you originally from, and where'd you grow up?
I'm originally from Detroit, Michigan.
Oh, wow.
And I grew up there until I lived there until I was 13 years old. And my father is from Virginia. My mother was from Detroit. And my father worked for the railroad, for the C&O. And when I was 13, we moved back, and I grew up the rest of till I went to college, and then somewhat after in Richmond, Virginia. And then after that, I went to the University of Miami. And then after Miami, I lived in New York City for 34 years.
How'd you like living in New York?
New York is the greatest place. It's the greatest. And I say that in the true mening of great, which doesn't necessarily mean good.
I'm from there, so you're preaching to the choir. I feel everything you're saying.
It's the great, meaning the biggest, the vastest, the most extreme. The
energy is unlike any place.
Energy is unlike any place, and even cities that are bigger, like Tokyo, doesn't have energy like New York, even though it's a lot bigger. It's very, very calm, feeling there, even though there's a lot more people, but nothing like New York. And I never could have done all the things I did and traveled all the places except for being in. I love New York. New York is great. My son grew up in New York and in Brooklyn. And
is that where you lived, in Brooklyn, most of the time?
Most of the time I lived in Brooklyn. Yeah.
So before it became like Yuppieville that it is now.
Yeah, when I first moved to Brooklyn, it was definitely not Yuppieville. There's a big vacant lot across the street with all these burnout cars, a lot of burnout buildings. I had an apartment that had a lot of flies in it. We had those fly strips.
The fly strips.
It was, and I grew up. I'm pretty, middle class guy. My father was a white collar worker, and we had a car and everything. Nothing spectacular, but when I first came to New York, it was very, very educational for me.
Baptism by fire, man.
Yeah.
But you know what? There's so many, like, you walk down Bleecker Street today.
Yeah.
And I left in '89, but I've gone back very consistently, and every time I've gone back, it's been kind of sad because it's been disappointing, actually, because all the like, you walk down Bleecker Street, there's nothing that I used to, Pizza Box is gone. I mean, that pizza shop was there 40 years. I mean, you got
Bleecker Bob's Records is gone.
Bleecker Bob's Records is gone. Most of the record shops are gone.
Oh yeah, pretty most of the record shops are gone. It's weird. It's weird, and there's still a lot of great stuff there, but it seems a lot different than when I first moved. I moved there in '81, and
so the city was like just recovering from like in the '70s. It was really bad there, man, and it was really unsafe. And that was when the crack epidemic came, and then man, I remember it was 1977. I was working in Midtown. I was 14, and I was working in Midtown do you remember they had messengers?
Sure, yeah.
That was before there was fax and email and shit. I'd pick up a package here and then bring it there. And I'll never forget, I got off the subway one day, and I don't know how, in retrospect, I was 14. I would have to take a bus and 2 subways there. I wouldn't let my kids do that. In retrospect. But I mean, I learned a lot, and I knew the city like the back of my hand at a young age. But I remember walking down 42nd Street and watching 2 guys rip off a woman's necklace. And that was, and remember they used to have the blind guys in front of like Fifth Avenue, in front of like all the shops there with the dogs with selling pencils. And it was just, so you got there right after like the bottom of the armpit of New York.
Yeah. Well, I got there, I didn't know anybody. I knew one guy who's one of my best friends, this great bass player, Nat Reeves. But, I went there and I didn't know anybody, so I started playing on the street, and there was this huge street music.
Yeah.
There, and and I played on the street all the time. I remember when my parents first came to visit me, and we were passing some guys playing on the street, and my dad said, "Geez, I hope you never do that, Randy." And like the guy said, "Hey, Randy, how you doing?"
That's awesome, man. That's one of my contemporaries, Dad.
right, yeah, and
shit, that's funny.
And I saw like one of the first times we were playing, right at Rockefeller Center for all the lunchtime for all the businessmen and secretaries.
Sure.
And, the businessmen and secretaries are smoking joints, at lunchtime. Can I say that? I mean, they're clouds.
You can curse, you can do whatever you want. Yeah.
From the businessmen, out at lunchtime. And we're sitting there playing, and this orange juice vendor comes up, and he's right next to me, an old guy with the orange juice card.
Right.
And he's talking to me. He's going, "God damn it, you guys are taking my spot. I've been here for 35 years, and you're coming here taking all my business away. So I'm giving it back to him. Get out of here. We were here first." So this young guy comes up out of the crowd and reaches, and they're talking. He knows the vendor, and he reaches down somehow in the vendor's cart and pulls up a machete.
Holy shit!
And he's waving it around, and we're at this point we're still playing, and everybody, there are hundreds of people watching this, and everybody's just got their mouth open. Nobody knows.
Nobody's videoing it at this point because there's
no. I wish they did. So,
yeah, right.
So then the vendor reaches down on the cart another place and pulls up a saber.
Holy crap!
They start dueling, and I don't know if. It seemed like they were serious. I don't know if they were, or if it was, but I mean, and then by this time we're trying to pack up, because at the time the cops, if they caught you playing on the street, they'd take the bass drum, drum and head down and pay to get it out, after a couple days. So we're packing up, and stuff like that happened. That they finally came and arrested the orange juice vendor, and the guy with the machete, the young guy, ran down in the subway with the machete, and got away. So things like that would happen. I mean, my first gig was an after hours club on like 55th Street down by the docks, where it was all pimps and whores
over on the west side. Yeah.
It was like it started at 5 in the morning and went till 10, 4 to 9 or 5 to 10, And I mean, I'm sure there are things like that going on now, but I just haven't heard of any.
No, I don't think so, man. I think most of everything. I remember my wife, she's from a little tiny village in England. And in the early 90s, we went to the city and we're walking down the block, down in the West Village somewhere. And across the street, this guy comes out with like a thick chain with a ball on it, like a medieval. And he starts beating the shit out of some other guy. And she's like, "Oh my God, what's going on?" I said, "That's nothing." Just keep walking. It's like, but that's normal. I mean, I hate to say it, but like, that's not particularly like, you look at it and you keep, it's like an accident on the side of the road. You see it and you drive on,
Yeah, I really haven't seen any. I never saw, I did see things like that the first during the 80s, and then after Giuliani,
Yeah, he cleaned it up.
Kind of changed a lot, and then it's gotten much more expensive and more gentrified, and there are definitely good things about that, but I miss a lot of the old stuff too, to tell you the truth.
Well, like you can't, the whole point of the Village, the West Village originally, and then at least the East Village, was you go there and there's still a sense of creativity and bohemia, and the freedom to do that, and you can't afford to be creative and be an artist in New York City now.
No. Moving here has been, the last couple of years has been sort of like getting out of jail or something.
Yeah.
I don't know if this will be the last stop, but a lot of even apartments in my neighborhood in Brooklyn now are $2,500 a month for one bedroom, and and the gigs still pay the same money or less that they did when the apartment was $300 a month.
Yeah, so that's the problem. That's the problem there. Yeah. But I know how you feel, because like I've been in Florida since '89, and Tampa is not a big city. It's more like a town. Mm-hmm. St. Pete across the bay is more like a city. It's cool. It's eclectic. They've got a lot of restaurants, bars, arty stuff.
I see.
But I often feel, and I don't know if you feel this way, I miss, like, it's not as, I'm like, well, I'm here in Tampa, I'm not in New York. There's a sense of, even though it's changed, and I don't think I'd want to be there now, but I do miss the pulse, I guess, the energy. That's really hard to replace.
It's impossible to replace, I think, yeah.
Now, is your son still up there?
Yeah, my son he's 23 now. He was working up in Montreal for a year. He designs video games.
Well, that's awesome. That's a great job.
And now he's back in New York, kind of deciding what he wants to do next.
Good for him.
Yeah, he's there, and for him, he's one of the only people that he went to college with and worked with that grew up in New York City.
Sure.
So he's got a different perspective than other kids, and I feel like it was a great place for him to grow up.
Yeah,
actually,
I'm really happy I grew up there. I mean, there's a lot of things I shouldn't have learned, but I'd rather have overexposure than underexposure.
Yeah,
like if somebody with a foreign accent comes over to me, I'm not freaking out,
right?
Because I had at least 1 or 10 or 20 of them in my building, whatever accent it is, pick a flavor. And I think that there's like. I think that's a good thing. Oh, it's a great thing, and I mean, just compared to Detroit, that when I was a kid, that was a big city with a world-class art museum, a world-class symphony orchestra, and music as far as Motown and rock and roll, and before that, a lot of jazz. You really couldn't escape it. It was everywhere. But you would go downtown and there would be nobody on the street in the middle of the day. It was deserted. Maybe a drunk or something. The first time I went to New York was with my dad on a business trip, and I said, "What are all these people doing here downtown?" Yeah,
because there was nobody on the street. So
that's interesting.
It's not a lot. It's not an alive place like New York. And
sure.
Since then, it's got. I don't really know what's happening there now, but a lot of great things have come from there, and they certainly have ethnic people and all. I mean, there's the Middle Eastern people. That's the largest Middle Eastern community in the United States is there, but it's nothing like New York, and that's a great thing about New York. And I feel like my son was lucky to grow up there in that kind of environment. Really, yeah, it's really rich, and you can't help but be kind of, I think, more open-minded growing up in a place like that than not getting exposed to that stuff. Well, that's true. But on the other hand, it is provincial in a way too. You don't think that outside of Jersey City.
No, you don't. You're very, like I said, you're super ethnocentric. If someone says I'm from, like I'm from anywhere, it's just like, oh, okay. Well, you're not from here. It is a very much like that. That famous New Yorker cover.
That's what I was thinking of. Yeah,
I think Saul something was Steinberger who designed New York, and then everything else. It's a pretty
yeah. That's a great cover.
I will tell you one thing about New York, and then we could move on for the rest of the world that doesn't want to hear this. I'm sorry, listeners. One time I was at a party in Long Island in New Year's Eve, and I guess this was probably 82, 83, 82, I think it was. So I took the LIRR back into the city, which I think stops at Grand Central, and I had to get the bus over maybe to the west side or something. So I had to get off. I couldn't take the subway from Grand Central. Let me tell you, when I was walking down Fifth Avenue, New Year's Day, probably 7:30, 8:30 in the morning. Mm-hmm. It was a morgue.
Yeah.
It was almost like a post-apocalyptic. It was that creepy. Nobody was out, and it was really weird. Nobody was on the streets. I'd never experienced that in my life. Very strange, man.
But that's the exception. That's not the rule.
Oh no, that's why it was so creepy. I'm like, oh my god, it was like between the time I left LIRR and got off, it was. I mean, what the hell happened?
Yeah.
But it had to be because it was New Year's Day earlier in the morning.
Oh yeah, everybody had partied to. Yeah, popped on New Year's Eve, and so
and for people listening, Fifth Avenue is not a residential area; it's all shopping. So I'm walking down all these stores that are all closed. Then, but it was very weird with literally nobody walking the streets at all. So really strange.
I can imagine.
Yeah, well, good. I'm glad we had that conversation, man. So how did you start getting into music? You grew up in Detroit. We moved to New York, but obviously you went to University of Miami. When was your exposure to music, and how did that lead you to picking up a guitar and eventually, saying, hey, I want to do this for a living?
I have a picture of myself when I was about maybe 8 months old, like holding a record, holding a 45 record. So I'm not from a musical family, but somehow I was always really attracted to music. And I remember the first thing I used to sing in, around the house, I would sing Perry Como songs. Perry Como was an old time crooner. Yeah. I remember my dad taking me to a radio station in Detroit where they had a remote, and I was singing a Perry Como song on the radio. It was at a car dealership, of course. And then after that, I liked to sing in the glee club at school. Sure. in junior high, but the kids would beat the hell out of me there because if you sing, you're it's like a sissy thing or something.
Yeah.
So I started. Actually, the other thing that really affected me was I remember when the Beatles came on the Ed Sullivan Show, and sure. It was like a bolt of lightning, just like about a million other people seeing them and seeing the reaction, all the girls screaming, and
that was nuts.
I said, geez, whatever they're doing, that's what I want to,
Give me some of that.
Yeah. Then I got a guitar, and I couldn't learn anything much on it. And then when I was about 13, when we moved down to Virginia, I just started obsessively practicing and listening to music then, and I kind of have an obsessive kind of personality, so whatever I get into, I really get into doing it. So that was, I always liked it, but I didn't really start doing it, getting into it till I was about 13. So.
And then, so did you take lessons, or were you just all self-taught with this obsessiveness and?
Yeah, at first I took a couple of lessons, but the guy kicked me out because he wanted to sell me this guitar that they were selling at the store, which is a Wurlitzer guitar, and I didn't want it. I wanted a Stratocaster or a Les Paul or something. So he threw me out, and then I learned to play on my own, and then when I went to the University of Miami, that was kind of the first time I had teachers, and and they showed me so many great things there. That was great, you know. But I was mostly self-taught before then, and also after then. But I do know the rudiments of theory and reading music and all that stuff. So
when did you get into jazz? Was it as a kid or when you went to school in Miami?
I got into it kind of when I was a teenager. In those days, the bands, a lot of the rock bands that I liked, like the Allman Brothers, for instance, and Jimi Hendrix, they would really jam. They would have these long improvised solos, which I really liked. And so someone told me that jazz was sort of the next level of that, and I started hearing some of the fusion music like John McLaughlin and Larry Coryell, who was turned out later on to be a very good friend of mine.
Oh, that's great.
And but you know, I heard stuff like that, and then it was difficult to find jazz records at that time in the 70s. And I went to the library and found a record of Charlie Parker, the saxophonist, and that was just like someone hit me with a bolt of lightning or something. That was like, this has got a lot of the blues in it, and it's sort of like the Allman Brothers, but it's a lot more sophisticated, and you're doing other things, and that kind of really what got me into jazz. Really, when the first time I heard Charlie Parker, and also a couple of guitar players, Kenny Burrell and Barney Kessel and Wes Montgomery, people like that, you know. And that kind of, and also one named Grant Green, who's kind of like a bridge between, you know, he's a very bluesy jazz player. So
I'm going to have to check him out, because I'm really more of a blues guy. I really have never followed jazz, but I do like Allman Brothers influenced, you know, like those, you know, like Dickie Betts was, you know, he would do a lot of that stuff in those long jams really well. Grant Green, is there an E or after
Green? Grant Green.
I'm going to check him out.
You'll probably like him because he's definitely a jazz player, but he plays a lot of licks from the blues scale, and, you know, he keeps a good feeling in there. You know, it's not some jazz can be sort of mechanical sounding to
it's a little out there. I mean, you have to be really, that has to be your thing to follow it, you know. I think, and if it is, you're just as passionate about it as I am about blues or something like that. But if you're not, it's hard to relate to.
Well, I mean, I don't consider myself exclusively a jazz player or a jazz fan either. I like a lot of different kinds of music, but if you're playing the standard jazz on the forms of the standard songs, if you learn to follow the form of the song, and then you follow the improvisation as the variations on the form of the song, it's a lot more fun to listen to. Rather than just like my mother used to say, how do they know when to start all that stuff? And then I like the part of the beginning and the end, but how do they know what to do in the middle? How do they know how to end at the same time? You know, it's following the form of the song just over and over again. So
I totally get it.
So once you learn that, it makes it more fun to listen to. It probably, to people that don't know that, it probably sounds like nonsense, and I don't blame them for not liking it, you know.
Now, I think Mike Durham referred me to you originally, right?
Yes, Mike, yes.
Now, he and I talked about jazz briefly, and I would imagine you've had these conversations with him, and I was saying, it seems really difficult. And he goes, I have a different theory about that. And we talked about it a little bit, and he's got a pretty good, he's got a really good, healthy way of looking at music in general, I think, where it's really, it doesn't overcomplicate anything. And I don't know if you've ever had those conversations with Mike, but he really does.
Yeah, I've had talked to him a little bit. He's one of the people that I met since I've been back in Virginia, and he grew up in Richmond also, but I didn't know him. I left before. I think he's a little younger than I am, and he left and made a great career for himself in Nashville. And So it's somebody that I've just recently kind of met. So I haven't had a lot of conversations with him, but I agree with him. I think that it's not that complicated, and also that if making music complicated for the sake of being complicated is very boring to me, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, it is. It takes away the fire, which is what music's all about.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Have you seen him play or heard him play?
He actually took a couple of lessons from me.
Okay, so you have. He's a monster.
But yeah, he plays. Not that he needed them at all, but he just, he was curious. So I've heard him play. Yeah, he's a fine player, and I know, he's done lots of different things that that I don't know anything about, like all that different studio work with all the different pop styles and all that. And so, yeah, he's a real good player. I know that, but I'd like to hear him play more.
Yeah, he's pretty. We were talking after the call, and he suddenly picked up his guitar, and he's like, really unassuming, just like very mellow guy with his ball cap, and all of a sudden, it was like wasn't expecting that. He just was noodling around. I was like, holy shit.
Yeah, good player.
Yeah. What were some of the bigger surprises to you when you first started playing professionally? So you graduate University of Miami, you move to New York. What were some of the things you're like, holy shit, they didn't teach me this in school?
Well, the one thing, they don't teach you anything about the music business. Very little. Like, for instance, how to get gigs, how to talk to a club owner to convince him to give you a gig with your band, or how to approach someone else that you'd like to play with, and ask them if you could play with them. Very little about how to negotiate with any kind of record contract, nothing like that, because basically most of the people that teach in schools don't know any of that. Yeah. Because if they knew that, a lot of them have kind of retreated into academia, because it's easier, and it's a lot easier to teach somebody what kind of scale to play and, listen to Miles and, all stuff like that, than it is to teach them how to do the business to keep yourself alive, because those parts are not the fun parts. The fun part is the actual playing part.
Yeah. There's an old expression, and this sounds horrible, but it is true for a lot of situations. To say, if you can't do, teach.
Yeah.
And I hate to say that, but that is true. And I got an accounting degree, and I used to often sit and think and listen to these guys. You're teaching me cost accounting. I need to know how to make money, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is great, but how can I make some money? And
that's exactly. It's, in a way, my education started when I left school and went to New York. Although they certainly did teach me a lot of great skills that I used. So
sure.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this, Randy. Everybody in our careers, whatever we're doing, pays tuition, and I was wondering if you'd be kind enough to maybe share one or two mistakes in tuition you paid along your journey, and what were the lessons you learned from those mistakes?
Most of the mistakes, I've made many mistakes, and most of the mistakes that I've made, I kind of attribute to being a little too timid to do something instead of actually trying to do something and falling on my face doing it. So, like one mistake I made early on was the first couple of years I was in New York, I had this connection to go out and jam with the great drummer Roy Haynes. Roy Haynes, who played with Charlie Parker and Monk, and he's one of the greatest jazz drummers of all time. And I went out a couple times to his house and jammed with him, and through a friend of mine. And for a couple of weeks we played, and then they called me to come back and jam another day, and I actually had a couple of students. I was teaching at this place in Brooklyn then, and I said I couldn't go because I had the students, and I in retrospect I should have canceled the students and gone to play with him, because the next week he took got a band together and took it to Europe, and I would have, maybe I would not have made it, but that would have been something that I should have gone for that rather than risked maybe getting fired from my teaching job, which would not have happened anyway, but I was too afraid to do it. So that's one mistake. Other times I had chances to do other things that for one or the other reason I wasn't quite bold enough to do, and although I've done a lot of bold things also, and I basically never regretted anything that I've done. So that way, so that those were kind of more like the mistakes, and then other mistakes were things that maybe on certain gigs, maybe not being able to read music well enough to make the gig quite, but that I don't, that one I don't really blame myself for, because at least I tried it, and then that made me get better at reading music,
sure,
for instance. So it's more the things of really being willing to just go for things on the moment's notice that I think were my biggest mistakes.
Do you think being angry at yourself for doing that those first couple of times was like the motivation for you to not do that afterwards?
Oh, sure. Because you really you start to learn that any mistake that you make, it's first of all, nobody's really paying attention to you that much, and nobody cares, and it's forgotten very quickly after it happens, even if they do, and it's just a learning experience. So the more you can realize that, it's good to go for. But on the other hand, people are, musicians, being a musician or an artist, it's a very personal thing. So it is easy to have your ego bruised, and that's not fun at all. But nobody's completely tough and immune to that either. So.
Sure. No, absolutely. The flip side to that, are there one or two particular things you did which at the time were out of your comfort zone but turned out to be really good breakthroughs for you, and you're glad you did them?
Yeah, pretty much anything that I did, including my first recordings and for instance, playing that first tour with Lou Donaldson, just going to Europe with him without even ever having played with him. They were all out of my comfort zone, but I'm glad that I did them. Or so, like the first time I went, a lot of trips that I've just taken by myself, like the first time I went to Bangkok, which was not that long ago. I kind of just hooked up the gigs through Facebook, through the internet, and I had no idea what I was going to find when I got there. And I'm all by myself, like halfway across the world. So I was a little concerned about that, but
everything worked out.
Everything worked out beautifully,
Moving to New York had to be a big one.
Moving to New York was a big one, and I mean, even the sense of space in New York, there's no
sense of no spaces.
The sense of no space, even that.
More like it.
To feel totally comfortable with that.
Yeah, yeah.
So
yeah, there's not. That's the big reason why I don't go back, man. I can't. I like space.
You just like the space to park your car is always good.
Yeah, yeah.
I like cars.
That's not a bad deal. Having
so I always I did take I loved the subway in New York, and I would take it home at 3 a.m. all the time, no problem.
Yeah.
And that's great, but I like having a car, and I remember going to gigs and driving around for hours looking for the parking spot, somebody to go out, and that's
a pain.
But that's not outside the comfort zone. That's more just like paying dues or hassle or something like that.
That's the price you pay to live in New York.
Oh yeah. But a lot of things I did out of my comfort zone, for sure.
Very cool. So if you had to go back and give advice to your younger self, what would you have told yourself?
I would have just said to go for it more than I did, but then there are the perils of the nightlife and all that, which I did do some, and I wish I'm glad that I didn't do more of that. Certain other things.
That's great.
Like really getting into doing drugs and stuff. So that going for it doesn't mean doing anything like that. It means just being bolder and having more confidence to play with people and so on.
Yeah. I gotta believe in New York, that's gotta be a commonplace occupational hazard. Getting involved with drugs. I mean, it's gotta be so prevalent.
It does, but I think it was when I was younger. I don't know about the guys coming up now. I'm not sure, but one of the good things was we were so poor we couldn't really afford all the good stuff.
Being broke has its advantages.
Yeah.
Hey, let's talk gear for a little bit. You were talking guitars before, and you showed me your 337. Is that your go-to guitar right now?
I have a couple of guitars that I like. I've never met a guitar I didn't like, basically, but I have a 1979 ES335, which I like a lot, and I also have a 77 Gibson ES350, which is a full hollow body with a plywood top. And if I'm playing, I do lots of different kinds of gigs. I do everything from solo gigs where I'm playing sort of like Joe Pass, to solo gigs where I'm singing and playing, to like playing with big bands, playing some rock gigs. So if it's a quieter kind of a gig, the hollow body works well, the ES350. If it's louder, then the 335 works better because it has the center block, or the 347, the one you saw. Or I have a couple of, I have a Strat, like, kind of like your white one there, and a couple other guitars. And I have a couple of flat tops. So it really depends, but the 350 and the 335 are probably my favorite guitars right now.
Is that the black one, the 335? I think I saw you playing the black one.
I love that one too. That's a Heritage Heritage H555, which is basically
I've heard. So what is the difference in your opinion between the Heritages and the Gibsons? Because you hear certain people say, "Oh, don't buy a Gibson. You get the exact same thing with a Heritage for half or a third of the price." Whatever.
I don't think there's too much difference. I think it's kind of the same. There are differences in individual ones from one to another. The Heritage that I have, I got from my friend Jay Wolf up at Wolf Guitars in Jupiter, Florida. Have you been over there yet?
No, but I've heard of that place.
Yeah, he's a great guy, Jay Wolf, and he's the biggest Heritage dealer of I think in the United States. And
that's interesting.
He got me this deal they made this guitar. It's not a special model, but it was a special color, and it has special tuning gears, that I wanted just because of the way it looks. Not because, but So he arranged that, and I've done some clinics teaching at his store too. He has things like that every once in a while. So that's a great guitar.
Interesting.
It's really not that much different than a 335. It's pretty much the same thing as a 355. It has an ebony fingerboard, but
man, I wish every guitar had an ebony fingerboard. It feels so good.
They do. The weird thing is the ones I've been playing mostly lately, they have the rosewood. The 350 has a rosewood, and the old 335 has a rosewood. I'll show you those, but it's there are differences between in individual guitars, and especially Gibson's. Gibson quality control is notoriously uneven.
Absent.
So I was an endorser for Gibson twice, right back in the 90s first, and then around 2006, 2007 for a couple of years. And because I have a Gibson L5 that's also a great guitar that they made for me, a special thin-bodied one, and called an L5 CT, which are hard to get. So I went into the Gibson office in New York and basically bullshitted my way into being an endorser. I've been an endorser for lots of other companies too, but I went in there and I got they made me the L5, which is incredibly good. It was one of the last guitars made by James L. Hutchins, who was one of the head luthiers at Gibson for the archtops for a long time. It's amazing. And then I got a 335 from them, which was a Memphis one made, and it sucked. There's nothing happening. You couldn't tune it up, So I finally, it wasn't, maybe a kid who got it for a Christmas present would be all right, but for me, like a professional musician, it really wasn't what it should have been. So I've had other ones like that the same guitar that are great, but it just that individual one. So I think that's what people are talking about with that. So as long as a good Gibson is better than anything to me.
Yeah, it is. It really is. I agree with you there.
Yeah.
Is there any cool or interesting stories behind how you got any of your guitars?
Yeah.
Which that L5 was a good story.
Yeah, the L5 that they made that for me. That's a wonderful guitar. The jazz guitar, the one that I play mostly, the ES350T. I had a friend in Brooklyn, an older gentleman named Danny Garofalo, who was an amateur jazz guitar player and had been a betting salesman in Brooklyn for years. And he was retired a long time, and he would buy and sell guitars all the time. And so you'd go over to his house and he'd have 10 guitars, and we'd jam over at his house. He had a lot of great guitar players who would come over there and jam. And he'd go over one week and he'd have 10 guitars, and the next week they'd all be gone. There'd be 10 more in this place. He would trade. Wow. So this guitar, that's really my favorite. The one guitar I would never sell. He called me up one time and he said, "I got something I think you'll like. I'm in the neighborhood." And he came by my apartment on Prospect Park Southwest in Brooklyn, and he had this guitar, and I traded him 2 guilds. At the time, I was a guild endorser. I was a guild endorser and they were excellent guitars, but I traded him 2 guilds for this. And this one somehow, and he's gone now, but he was my good friend. He was the type of guy that would like go to the hospital with you or anything you needed. He's in your corner like a relative. So this is that's the one guitar I'll never sell.
And what guitar is it?
It's a Gibson ES350. Let me see if I can find it. Where is it? Hold on.
Randy's just stepping behind him to grab his guitar.
Sorry.
It's all good, man.
I'm out of the screen now, but here it is. It's
Wow. Really nice sunburst.
Yeah, and it's kind of a thin one, you know. It's not real big and fat, you know. So it's
Wow. You know, I'm so lucky that I get to talk to guys like you, because when you pick up a guitar and do that, it's literally like magic to listen to. It really is. It's like, you know, you really see the difference between a professional and like just a hack like me. When you pick that up, and I've had guys do that, and it's I feel really lucky and special that I get to see and watch that once in a while, because it's just amazing, you know.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, I know it's a lifetime of what you're doing, and like it's probably, but it's beautiful what you can do when you have, you know, the talent and the skill set you have. You know, it's just, it's effortless looking, but I know it's far from effortless.
Yeah, well, it's a lifetime, you know, of really thinking about music, and
a lifetime of homework, man.
Yeah,
lifetime of homework.
But it's good homework. It's fun, you know. I could have never survived without it. I mean, not, and I don't mean financially. I mean
emotionally. Yeah,
emotionally,
what it's done to you. Yeah. I totally get that.
Yeah.
What are you playing out of amp wise nowadays? What do you like?
I have a Monoprice amp.
What is that?
What Monoprice is a website that sells mostly HDMI cables and computer stuff. When my son turned me on to it, and I looked up tube amps, and they have a one speaker tube amp, 15 watts. Is $179.95, and I usually use that on most of my gigs now.
Really?
Yeah, it's a great amp. It's some Chinese thing.
And it's just can you overdrive it? Can you push it?
It's got beautiful overdrive sound. It's the great thing about it. I would show it to you all. It's in the trunk of my car, but it's very low wattage, and it has a master volume. It has a gain, and it has a volume, and if you turn it up kind of loud enough to play, it'll break up a little bit. But if you really want to overdrive it, you can really do it. And it's got a beautiful reverb. It's much better than a Fender Blues Junior, which is, you know, that's costs a lot more. And
is it like comparable to like the old Fender Blackfaces?
I don't know. I mean, I had some Fender Blackface amps that I don't have anymore. I sold a couple of them when I left New York. I had a 65 Pro Reverb, and I had a 67 Vibrolux, which I think was the amp I used for years. I think that might have been the best sounding amp I ever had when it was working well. But they got so unreliable that, and a lot of, to tell you the truth,
they're 50 years old. Yeah, it's not
you're 50
like
years old, and to tell you the truth, on the years I traveled, I never brought an amp. Like with any of the gigs with Lou Donaldson or any of the ones throughout Europe or in Japan, I never brought an amp. So I kind of learned to get the same sound out of almost any amp, including PA monitors, all kinds of shit. You know,
that's wild.
So yes, it does matter, you know, but it's not. But I'm not as particular about the amp as I used to be. I also have a PV Classic 30. That's a great amp.
Man, you know what? It's just hysterical. When I was up in Nashville, I was telling you about an amp. I bought a PV Delta Blues. It's a 1x15 30-watt amp. This is fucking amazing.
Oh yeah, that's all you need. That's a great amp.
I mean, it's from 2001. I think they still make them. It's got reverb and tremolo. I mean, like, and a boost and overdrive. It's just like, I mean, it's just phenomenal.
Yeah, they're great amps. It's a little heavy with the 15-inch speaker, in it, but
yeah,
that's all you need. Yeah, something like that. But check out the mono
price. Yeah, I'm gonna do that. You got me intrigued now.
100, I think they went up. I think they're $199 now.
For a 15-watt tube amp that if it's actually good, that's a hell of a deal.
12-inch speaker with a spring reverb in it.
I'm gonna have buddy of mine's looking for an amp like that. I'm gonna tell him.
It's a great amp. It's a great amp. It's deal of the century. I can't believe it. You know.
Ever sell a guitar you wish you can get back?
No, I've sold a lot of guitars, and I don't really have any that I've sold that I wish I could get back. Really a lot. The probably the nicest one I've ever sold was a Gibson L4, but I sold it to my buddy, who's a great player up in Connecticut. One of my best buddies, Richard Goldstein, he's the guitar teacher at Hart, and he gigs a lot. So, you know, I wasn't really playing that guitar, so he's playing it a lot, and I know that would be the only one I missed if I missed any of them. But I don't really miss them once they're gone.
Cool. What's something that you've learned about yourself along this whole musical journey?
Ooh, that's. I've learned that I'm not a perfect person. You know, I'm not perfect. I'm never going to do everything right.
What's your best childhood memory?
Best childhood memory. Let me see. My best. You mean when I was a little kid?
You tell me.
Oh, or teenager or what?
Yeah, whatever you want to pick.
Oh.
We're limited with guidance in this show.
My best childhood memories were actually my best childhood memory was watching the Detroit Tigers win the World Series in 1968. And my best young adult memory was watching the Mets win the World Series in 1986. Both of them have nothing to do with music. I'm sorry.
Totally cool, man. That's great. So one of my questions is, do you have any interests outside of music? I'm assuming baseball is one of your interests.
Oh yeah, I like baseball, and I like novels, and I'm gonna get that guy Haruki
Murakami. Yeah, I think you'll like him for sure.
Yeah, and I have other interests. Yes, lots of interests outside of music, but
that's cool, man.
Yeah.
Tell me something about yourself, Randy, that people would either be surprised to hear or would find a little odd.
Ooh, I don't know. I used to have a side business selling vintage clothing.
That's odd. That's interesting.
It is odd, isn't it? Because at one time I owned about 200 vintage suits from the 1930s up through the 1960s.
Wow, that's interesting.
And this was, I don't really do it too much anymore, although I'm still I'm an incredible clothes freak, fashion freak still, and like when I go to Thailand, I always have some suits and shirts made for me, and stuff like that. But I, at one point, when I had records coming out at first in the 90s, I would arrange these little tours for myself, all through the Midwest mostly, and I knew every Salvation Army and every Goodwill from basically Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, out to about Indianapolis, and then down through Baltimore and I had lots of friends because I knew all these musicians, mostly in those days guys that played straight ahead jazz, black guys, African American guys who like to wear suits and stuff on the gig. So a bunch of my friends, I knew everybody's sizes and everything, and I would buy anything that would fit me, or anything that I knew would fit one of my friends,
And so you just flip them on your road trips.
Yeah, the road trip. I had a Honda Civic with a hatchback, and I'd fill out the back of it up with all this stuff. And then a lot of times the last stop would be Baltimore. I also knew a dealer there, a vintage clothing dealer, and I would sell all my excess stuff to him. And I'd get a couple $100 more for the tour.
That's pretty cool. That's interesting. That is interesting
thing to do. And I kind of stopped doing it because, it wasn't. It was just kind of a fun hobby, but it was. But that's something that people wouldn't. It's a weird thing to do.
Yeah, for sure, man. What most important person in your life?
Oh, the most important person in my life is my son. Is my son.
What's your non-musical superpower?
Superpower. In which way? You have to clarify that.
Well, I think everybody has something that they're kind of unique at or good at doing, right? And it doesn't have to be like major stuff. Like I interviewed a guitar player this morning, and she was telling me her superpower is that she used to be a semi-professional golfer, and so she could take a golf ball and tap it up on a wedge and just balance it. So it could be something fun like that. It could be, maybe your ability, superpowers to negotiate great prices on clothes or something like that.
No, actually, I've been practitioner of this type of yoga called Ashtanga yoga for about almost 20 years now.
Oh, wow, that's a long time.
And which it's a very physical form of hatha yoga, and which involves, it's basically exercises, which is 90 minutes a day, 6 days a week, and which I'm not doing currently. I have a little injury. It also is famous for giving you rotator cuff injuries. It's because it's a lot of handstands and jumping through the legs and balancing on different things, and it's a very good workout. So that has kept me going for a long time, and given me. I'm not a super practitioner of it, but I certainly was an avid and hoping when I get over this injury to be a practitioner of it again, and that gave me super energy and power to do everything else that I would. Maybe that's the weird thing about me, even because I haven't sold vintage clothes in a long time, but I've been very into this for a long time.
Yeah, well, all you got to do is look on Facebook and see your people you went to high school with, and see how much of value that doing what you've been doing has done for you. Where it's just people don't take care of themselves, man. It's unfortunate,
Oh, I'll be 61 next week. That's
yeah. You look great, and you look like you're in good shape, and you're fit, and all that stuff. So whatever you're doing is paying off.
Thank you. Yes, Ashtanga Yoga, ASHTANGA. There is a guru of it in India who I did study with a little bit, but the main guy I studied with is a guy from Texas named David Swenson, who is a totally normal guy. I'm friends with his wife too, and he doesn't put on any airs. If you watch him practice, he is a superpower. It's like gravity means nothing to him.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Hey, so what are you proudest of? Either your life or musically?
Oh, Boy, that's a good question.
It's a hard question if you're a Type A person as well, because
Yeah,
you know
definitely.
Type A people are never really proud or satisfied. They're always like looking for the next, continuing to raise the bar.
One thing the musical thing that I am the most proud of is starting to sing on gigs after many years of being a very established guitar player, and really being able to just do what I had been doing for years and pretty much get gigs and still be known for that, and first of all, singing is very fun, and it makes you play better because you start to connect more from your ear to your guitar more. So
it's another instrument.
It's another instrument, and it's really fun, and it's a lot easier to entertain people with in a club. But heavy, hardcore jazz musicians are notoriously derisive of singers and also very, very afraid of singing themselves. So, and I certainly was when I started, and when you don't have anything to refer to, so when you're in a club and it's loud and that first note comes out and you don't know sometimes what the hell it's going to be, that took a lot of stones to do that, and I've gotten a lot better at it, and people seem to like it, especially here in Virginia. And
awesome.
So that's kind of the proudest. That's the thing that I've done in the last, it's been about the last 7 or 8 years that I feel like I'm proud of right now musically.
Very cool, man. That's also probably something that took you to get out of your comfort zone, and that you did, and it worked.
It really took me out of my comfort zone, and I even, I got fired one time for doing it, and I was, but mostly people have been supportive of it, and also, but it really took me out of my comfort zone.
And you're going to sing on your upcoming record, correct?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'll sing at least, probably 3/4 of the songs. The last record I did, I sang about half the songs. The record before that, I sang two or three songs on it, and so I've been getting more in, and the people here are supportive of that, and you see in probably like the same as where you are, or Nashville, certainly Virginia. There's a lot of music happening, and there's a big music scene, but instrumental jazz is a small part of it. There's not very much of that. So if you sing at all, it's kind of like you're talking to people. They can relate to what you can draw them into your playing more than if you just got up there and started firing it off right away. You'd lose them. So it's
I think there's much more engagement. Yes, yeah, I have to agree with that. So I'll ask you 3 more questions, man.
All right.
And I really appreciate your time. What's favorite place you've traveled? You've been all over.
That's really hard because I have different favorites for different things, but I loved traveling in Italy and Spain, but really especially even more so in Italy. The food and the people are so nice, and like I said, I'm a fashion fanatic.
Oh yeah.
Stuff like that. I used to go to Milano with Lou Donaldson, and I would spend all my money, on buying clothes, and it was. I love Italy, and then for playing, Japan was a wonderful place to play as far as the audience, and I used to go up to play in Scandinavia a lot. I did tours in Sweden and in Norway a lot, and those were great. And as far as kind of having a lively conversation at a bar with somebody, you really can't beat England for that. That's
yeah.
So I have a lot of
you can't beat England for the amount of bars that are around either.
No,
it's prolific how many bars are there.
You're right, and especially well, it's your language, but a different take on it. So
it is, and it's not. It's kind of funny, isn't it?
But you can really get into some funny conversations with people there, I've found. So
yeah. Well, especially that if you go into the smaller towns, they don't hear an American accent. You're like really a celebrity when you go in there. They just don't hear it. It's the same way that people. What's that?
What town is your wife from?
She's from a little village, not village, a little town called Dunstable. It's northwest of London, not far from Luton, which is an airport town, which you might have heard of.
Oh yeah.
But I remember it was really funny. I was there, I guess, in the early '90s, and first time I went there, maybe '93, and I went into an electronics store because my mother-in-law needed an extension cord, and I started talking, and this really young girl was standing there with her mouth open, and I said, "Are you okay?" She goes, "Your accent is so beautiful." And I just laughed. I almost pissed myself. It was because back then I had really more of, because I was younger, and so I had more vestiges of like my New York accent.
Oh yeah.
And I'm sitting there thinking this horrible accent coming out of my mouth. This young girl, because you just don't hear it. I was probably the first American she's ever heard.
Yeah, but I mean, I had a Danish girlfriend at one point, and her only complaint about me. Well, there were many later on, she got to know me, but at first the only complaint was I didn't have enough of a New York accent. Like she loved Robert De Niro and the Italian New York thing.
Yeah.
That really, really, really was something special to her, and so the only. And I don't really have any. I mean, I have vestiges of different things now, but she said she would have liked it better if I'd had a stronger New York accent.
You can't win, man.
No, you can't win.
Hey, who's had the biggest influence on your life?
Oh boy. God, that's a really hard question. I'm sure I'll think of the answer probably after we get off. There's been a lot of people that have had one of the big huge influence on my life is my son, having my son and having to take care of him, and also seeing how much of an adult he is now compared to me in certain ways, and then. As far as music business, that saxophone player Houston Person was a huge influence on my life, because he really taught me a lot of things about playing, but also about how to do the business and getting gigs and talking to people and how to and that he's had a huge influence on me, on my musical career. So
that's great. It's good that you had a guy like that.
Oh yeah. Certainly all the others, and I mean, lots of other people that I grew up with, and there's a lot of people. So it's hard to say just one person.
Last question, man. What's the best advice you've ever been given, and who gave it to you?
Oh, boy. Ooh, that's a hell of a question. That's, I'm sure I'll think of this later on, but I can't think of it right now. The best advice I've ever been given, and who gave it to me? Oh, boy. Man, he stumped me.
No, No worries. No worries, man. We covered a lot. So let's talk about, first of all, I can't thank you enough for your time. You've been extremely generous with it, and I really appreciate it. But where can people, I want to talk to people about your new album. It's it's by the Randy Johnston 3, and it's Johnston, Johnston. It's called Shockwave, and it's available on CD Baby. You want to talk about it a little bit and about your other release?
Yes, you can get this. This one is on CD Baby. This is the first record I've ever done that's a self-produced label. It's actually on a friend of mine's label called Small World Records, who's a buddy of mine down here. But this is great because this features this great young organist down here named Jonah Kane West, and also one of my very best oldest friends, John Hanks, who's a drummer from Durham, North Carolina. And I think this is my best playing ever on a record. It's the most organic sounding, the best material that I've ever done. I'm singing on about four tunes. There's 4 or 5 instrumental songs on there, and it's kind of with my regular working band, so we played together a lot. The record before that was called People Music, which is also, if I may say so, a great record with great organ player Pat Bianchi, who lives in New York City, and young drummer Carmen and Torre. And then my old records going back, there's a lot of them you can find on, even I saw some on eBay that you can find them and you can download them, and lots of those feature some of the big name sidemen and jazz like Benny Green and Kenny Washington. And
Kenny Washington, the bass player?
Kenny Washington was a drummer.
Okay. He out of New York though, right?
Yeah, in New York.
Okay. He's played with a buddy of mine. I know. He is. Yeah.
Great. He's a great drummer. So there's a lot of things out there, but I think the new record is really representative of what I'm doing now, and I feel like it's the most musical one I've ever done. So please check it out, Shockwave.
Check it out, everybody. It's called Shockwave by the Randy Johnston 3, Johnston. It's on CD Baby. And anywhere else people could find you online that you want them to know about?
Oh yeah, sure. There's many YouTube videos. I have my own YouTube channel, and there's many other ones in all kinds of different situations. And so if you just put in my name and Randy Johnston, and it's not the pitcher, it's Johnston with a T, and many things will come up, and you can listen and watch things going back to the 90s and
awesome
different things.
Very cool, man. I really appreciate your time. Again, thank you so much. It's really been a pleasure. You've been so candid and open. I appreciate all the really cool stories you shared, and I hope people come and check you out. It's Randy Johnston, Johnston. Check him out on YouTube. Go to CD Baby and check out his latest album called Shockwave by the Randy Johnston 3. Any final words of wisdom?
No, Craig, I appreciate you having me on the show, and it's very nice of Michael Durham to recommend me for it, and I hope we can keep in touch and let me know what goes on, and any reaction from the people out there who hear the show, as long as it's a good reaction, I'd love to hear.
I'll tell you about it. I don't know why it wouldn't be. This has been a really nice, really pleasant call. So everybody, thank you very much for listening. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed this interview as much as I did. Thanks again so much to Randy Johnston for his time, being so generous with it. I really appreciate it. Go to everyonelovesguitar.com, everyonelovesguitar.com, and sign up to get notified about future episodes, along with some cool stuff for guitar players. Now, be nice, go play your guitar. That's what it's about, and have some fun. Till next time, peace and love, and I'm out. We hope you enjoyed this show. If you did, subscribe to the Everyone Loves Guitar podcast, and you can do this online at everyonelovesguitar.com or on iTunes. And if you like the show, please leave us a 5-star positive review. The more 5-star reviews we get, the higher our show ranks, and higher rankings mean we get to continue speaking with cool, interesting guests on our show. We'll see you on the next episode, and until then, keep playing your guitar and have fun making music.